So this is just a little bit of a review from our last meeting, and I pulled just a few data points off of that EL problem identification that's linked on our agenda. It's at the very top. It's kind of a two-pager that really kind of goes into detail about um, everything that's going on in the county with EL students. So what our counts have looked like over the time, what our WIDA scores have looked like over time, how our EL students have compared to our non-EL students on our other state testing. It also identifies some of the problems that we're going to talk about today with language assistance plans and students being served with ESL or bilingual certified staff. So these were just a couple of those data points. We did talk about those last time. If you get in and look at that EL problem identification that's linked on the agenda, you'll notice that the most recent data is the 18-19 data. And I was just kind of trying to keep that all, that was the last year that I could get all three sources of data, which would be counts, WIDA, and state assessment. If it's of interest to everybody, I could get that updated with the more recent WIDA and counts, but of course we wouldn't have the state assessment, the regular state assessment data there as well. So I kind of kept that one because at least it was all apples to apples and all the most recent data that we had. So when we look at this, or how we compare to the state, our students in Muskegon County are not performing as well as the other EL students in the state. Of course, that would be on the state assessment and also on the WIDA. And there's very large and alarming gaps to how they perform on the state assessment, especially in the area of math. So just you can look up more information on that problem identification if you wanted more detail on that. And that was really why at the ISD we wanted to kind of shift and try to take a little bit more of an active role, both of the grant management for the Title III consortium, and then also trying to run some more of these collaboration opportunities. So a lot of things have changed in the county in the last 3 or 4 years since I was at Whitehall and worked with the EL program there. There's a lot more ESL and bilingual certified staff, certified teachers getting hired and put into positions, and which is great. But we're still pretty far off from where we would need to be for that. And if any of you attended Pam Schwallier's presentation that she did, I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, or were able to watch or read about that afterward. She has a lot of really compelling evidence that the state itself is doing really poorly in this area, and our county is not even where the state is on this. So it's this being able to have these conversations is going to continue to be important. So again, I'm not going to dig really deeply into this. These were things that we discussed last time, and I think everybody that's here this time was here last time. But last time we did talk about that required paperwork with the home language survey and the immigrant questionnaire. And I do think that the immigrant questionnaire was a spot that everybody felt like I shouldn't say everybody, that quite a few people in the group thought maybe might not be on their enrollment paperwork. And so this might be a reminder just to as you go back to your districts this time, to take a look at your enrollment paperwork and see if that immigrant questionnaire is on there. I think most districts are doing a good job with having the home language survey on there now and having the correct questions on it. But I think that it was still a kind of a blind spot in the county about the immigrant questionnaire. That's been a much more recent addition. We also went through kind of the typical EL identification, which kind of in the middle of the year, hopefully this isn't as big of a thing unless we get some move-ins. And of course, there's kind of this new situation that we're in where we might not be able to work with students face-to-face. It still is a requirement to make sure that we're identifying the students. And so there was a whole kind of separate process for trying to do that during distance learning. And then finally, we also went over that typical immigrant identification piece. So just wanted to kind of keep some of that stuff in from the last meeting, just to kind of keep the conversation going on that. And then also to bring up that immigrant identification piece again. If you went back last time and looked and it wasn't there, it might be good to check again or to see if there was any movement on that. I know that most of us aren't responsible for pupil accounting or those sorts of things, but that could be a good thing to check to see if it's on there and to talk to your pupil accounting folks about it. And if anybody either administratively or in pupil accounting have questions about that, or where it should go, or how other people are doing it, or that sort of thing, they're welcome to reach out to me or Rachel, and we can kind of talk a little bit more about that. We can also talk to them about, once it does get marked on your paperwork, what to do next in Power School. So, because it's not entirely obvious about what you're supposed to do in Power School about immigrant students. But today I wanted to talk more about the language assistance program. And so I'm going to start off by talking about the consolidated application. So the consolidated application is something that everyone in every district in the state has to fill out, and it's the way that we get approval for our federal grants. And so anything that has title in the name means that it's a federal grant. So Title I, which everybody's really familiar with, Title II, which is our professional learning grant, Title III, which is our English learner grant, and Title IV, which is kind of like a consolidation grant. We apply for all of those in the consolidated application. And so it's the law that that when we're teaching English to the students, that it really needs to be paid from our district general funds. So a lot of times when I talk to superintendents or curriculum directors about this, I'll say, hey, it looks like, you don't have an ESL or bilingual certified staff, or you don't have programming put in place for the kids. And they'll say, yeah, we don't get any Title III money. Well, it doesn't matter that you don't get any Title III money, because it's a general fund expense to provide that. And that's that Lau versus Nichols case that's is usually the one that's cited for that. And it goes back several decades, that it's the district's responsibility out of general funds to provide this English instruction to the students. And another thing that I often will hear is that people will say, well, you know what, we're going to fund our EL program out of 31A because those kids are all at risk. And you can't do that either. So 31A is a state supplemental grant. And again, that's not the general fund. So if you're working with anybody or you're talking to somebody and they're like, well, we're just going to serve the kids in Title I, or we're going to serve the kids with 31A, that's not allowable. And it's a possible OCR violation, and nobody wants to get an Office of Civil Rights violation. So those would just be a couple of things to look out for. And if you're getting any kind of pushback from anybody about not being able to fund positions or put programming into place because you don't have the federal or state grant dollars for it, that can never be a barrier. It has to be something that's paid for out of the general fund. So that kind of comes to that third point. So those federal funds that we mentioned, or those state funds, 31A, Section 41 is a state EL grant, and they can be used for supplemental purposes. So that would be things like, we're going to put together an after-school program, or we're going to have a summer program for our EL students. So there's, we want to buy new materials that they can use. So if a lot of things that you might think of for like Title I and that sort of thing, you can supplement, but your main program has to be paid for out of your general funds. So that kind of brings me to that language assistance program piece. So that language assistance program is a report that gets filled out in the consolidated application. And basically what we're doing in that is we're guaranteeing to our state government, the Michigan Department of Education, that we are either providing all of our language services out of the general funds, or we will if we get EL students. So there are some districts that have none. Well, there's one district in the county that has no identified EL students right now. But it's the law that we fill out this language assistance plan, and that's our guarantee to them that we're paying for these EL services out of the general funds. If we don't fill that out, they will not release our federal funds to us. So we won't be able to get our Title I or our Title II funds if we don't say to them, yes, we're providing this instruction to our students out of our general funds. So that language assistance program becomes a kind of an important piece in the consolidated app. And so what the language assistance plan does is it describes how the district will teach English to our EL students, and how we'll pay for it from our general funds. So I'll pull up just the example that we used for the ISD here that you may have seen in the communication that Rachel sent out. And you'll notice that in each column it says, how are you going to provide the level of service and the numbers of hours per day from general funds? And they like make it in all caps. And then it says, what's the mode of delivery from general funds in all caps? How are you going to pay for the staff that are providing the service from general funds, all in caps? So it's that whole piece of this coming from the general funds is really first and foremost in this. And then it also divides it out, those three areas, into the different WIDA proficiency levels. So what are you going to do for your students that are entering and emerging? And we know that those students are going to need a much higher level of service, and they might need many more hours a day than the students that are in other areas. So they have it broken out between entering and emerging, developing, expanding, and then bridging and reaching. So they kind of, they group up the kids that got a 1 and 2 on the WIDA, and the kids that got a 5 and a 6 on the WIDA. They group those ones up. So then you have to describe in those areas how you're going to serve that. And it's a requirement that you say there that our EL students will be served by an ESL or a bilingual certified teacher. So if you put in there, well, we're going to have them work with a parapro after school, that's not going to cut it. They'll, if they're actually reading the program, they'll send it back and say, you must put in here that you're serving with an ESL or bilingual certified teacher. So a little story back from when I was in Whitehall. I was a curriculum director there and an elementary principal. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to put what we're really doing in here, because we didn't have an ESL or bilingual certified teacher. We had about 6 or 7 kids in my school that were language learners. They were identified as EL. And we had our teacher SIOP trained, and we made sure that the kids were in a class with a teacher that had SIOP. And then after school, we had extra tutoring for them after school that was taught by a teacher that was trained in SIOP. We had no ESL bilingual certified teachers. So I put in what we were really doing. And they kicked it back and said, put in here that they're ESL or bilingual certified. I said, but they're not. And they said, if you don't say that your EL students will work with an ESL or bilingual certified teacher, then we will not give you your general funds, or we won't release your federal funds, your Title I and that. And I said, but that's not what we're doing. And they said, then you need to make a plan to get someone for that. And so we made a posting, and we posted for an ESL or a bilingual certified teacher. And that's, so for years we had that, because I don't know if Heather was still working on that, or she is working on it now, or those sorts of things, but we didn't have, we had it posted, and we even tried to collaborate, I think maybe with Holton and Montague, to try to cobble together a more than just a 0.1 or 0.2 that we needed. So it just goes to show that if that they're serious about us having ESL or bilingual certified teachers working with the kids, and they encourage you to work with neighboring districts to try to put that together. If you don't have that, they're going to want you to try to continue to seek it out, because it does not meet the law to provide their services any other way than through general funds and from an ESL or bilingual certified teacher. Whew, I know that was kind of a lot. We're going to give you guys a few minutes to talk about this here in just a minute. And you have access to this, so you can kind of pop back to the slides when we get into some breakouts here in a few minutes. So in the agenda, I wanted to just show that I do have our 2019 WIDA scores kind of broken out by score band. And I'm just going to show that here real quick. We're not going to look at it right now. When we get into our breakouts, you're welcome to kind of take a look at that. And we kind of communicated that we'd like you guys to bring your language assistance program plans if you were able to. And so you could look at them and kind of see, does it talk about being funded from the general fund? How is it broken out between those different levels? Does it say that that the kids would be working with an ESL or a bilingual certified teacher? So those would be some things to look at on your language assistance plan. If you didn't bring that today, that's okay. I put the instructions here for how to access it. So you can still, you probably won't be able to access it because it's in the consolidated application. So you have to go and get that from whoever does that. And it's usually like your curriculum director or possibly your superintendent. But these are our score bands. I'm going to blow this up for us a little bit. So this is linked in our agenda as well. It's right here, 2019 WIDA score bands. And this just kind of shows how this is broken out in the county. So we had in the 2018-19 school year, we had 422 EL identified students. And so you can see that about 100 of them, of that 400, so a little under the quarter, fell into that newcomer range. This entering and beginning. So a whole quarter of those students were really in this newcomer range. And then most of the students were in this developing or expanding area, with a few kids up here in the bridging and reaching section. So that breaks it down by district. And then you can also see how did that break down by the grade level. And so that can be kind of interesting to look at as well. There wasn't really any grade level that, like, there was this giant bubble I'm going through. I would say maybe the biggest outlier that year was our second graders, who I think would be our current fourth graders this year. But you can kind of see that there's a fairly even distribution with that exception of second grade. And you can also see where were those grades that the kids were in that newcomer range. And it's not a surprise that the largest amount came in kindergarten. So yeah, it's the data is pretty interesting to look at. And so when you think of in your language assistance plans, there's a section that's divided up for the kids that scored a 1 or 2. There's a section for kids that scored a 3. There's a section for kids that scored a 4, and then there's a section for kids that scored a 5 or a 6. So before we move on to talk a little bit more about the WIDA, I want to just see if there's any, and after we talk briefly about the WIDA, we're going to get into some breakouts so everybody can talk a little bit more about the language assistance plans and the WIDA if you'd like. But before we do that, are there any questions that anybody had, or is there anything that anybody else knows more about that I didn't cover that they'd like to share with the whole group? Maybe if I could get, like, in the chat, like 1 through 5 of 1 is, this is literally the first time I've ever heard of a LAP, and a 5 of I helped to complete it and I know all about it. Maybe if we could just get in a chat just to kind of see what our distribution is. All right. Well, I'm glad that we were able to at least introduce this to a few people. Hopefully that wasn't too much drudgery for those that know a little bit about it. So that is all that I had on the language assistance program. And Rachel is going to go over a few things about the WIDA. And then we're going to just get into a couple of breakouts and give everybody a chance to just have some conversation about those 2 items. So Rachel, are you ready to take it away?
Yeah, so I just had a few reminders about WIDA now that the testing window is open, that it's been extended until April 9th, that the WIDA access assessment has to be done in person. And I know that there's been a lot of other considerations that have had to be made now that it needs to be in person. I have a few that are listed in the slide, but just some things to keep in mind about the space that you're using, cleaning of devices, flexibility in testing schedules, student transportation for students that are remote right now, parent and guardian agreements to bring their student in, and if they're willing to bring their student in for multiple days for testing, or if everything needs to be taken care of in one day. Another thing to keep in mind when this is a time when we're communicating a lot with families is many of the schools that have signed the agreement with telelanguage still have free money available through the ISD. So if there's anything that you needed that is written translation or verbal translation. A lot of schools still have that money available. Montague, Oak Ridge, Muskegon. If you want to know more about how to translate, or if you want to know more about how to access that information to log in, just let me know and I can send that to you. Each building has its own password, and then that gets charged right to the ISD. So the district never sees a bill for it. If you exceed your allotment, then you'll receive a bill for the difference. Diane had asked when that expires. I don't know. I think it goes at least until June 30th. And I don't know, this was something that was set up through our administration at the ISD. So if we wanted to carry it over into next year, maybe that they would be willing to do that. But as far as I know, I would probably say it's just for this fiscal year, this school year up until.
I would guess though, Rachel, that we're going to do it again next year. So
Yeah.
while it might not make more, like if you had $100 this year or whatever, you'll get another $100 next year. It just might not become $200.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we just haven't talked about it a lot, but it's there. So
Can I just add one other thing? I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I would say that if you do exceed the amount, what you pay is very reasonable. So like it's not a prohibitive amount.
Yeah, for sure. The rates are really reasonable. It was a negotiated rate that Pam Schwalier had set up for the state. So even the amounts that I've been seeing coming in for translation have all been relatively low. Every school received at least $50. So and only 3 districts have exceeded that amount right now, only by a few dollars. So that's just something to keep in mind. Another thing is that with the how fluid the situation is, and MDE applying for a waiver for testing accountability, they're recommending any student that is capable of exiting soon to test those students first, because no matter what happens with the waiver, and I'll talk about that again in another slide, if we're able to exit a student, that's always a good thing. And, we've been hearing a lot of different situations from different districts with the requirement to have in-person testing, that some students are not able to test either from parent refusal or transportation issues or COVID and needing to quarantine. And there's been a lot of different circumstances that have come up. And MDE just wanted to make sure that those situations are being documented. So have that in writing, whatever happened with that student, if there was a refusal to bring them in for testing, or if they're not able to test for some reason. We want to have those things documented. They had indicated that in the event of an on-site review, they want to make sure that there's systems in place to see that we're tracking that kind of information and show that there was a refusal just for documentation purposes. And then just a reminder also that because there's such needed flexibility right now with scheduling, that there's also a higher need to have more people being willing to be test administrators. And so just a reminder that anybody that does administer the WIDA test has to be certified through the WIDA Secure portal. And that's it for that slide. One other reminder is about the waiver from MDE, that they submitted a waiver to the U.S. Department of Education for accountability for summative assessments. And there is a period that's open right now until February 12th for public comment. And you can submit your comments to the email address that's in there. I can also put that in the agenda. But anything that I would recommend sending anything that you think would be relevant to this decision, to send that off to them. But the public comment period is open until February 12th. So I just wanted to put that in there too.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is our state is, so it appears to be supportive of this, you know, at least our state superintendent, and they want to submit the waiver. It's just a question of if it'll be accepted at the USED. We know from the last administration that they didn't want to do that. I've also heard about our incoming administration that, and this is more anecdotal just from like news reports and stuff like that, but they're not really all that interested in granting a waiver either. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Yeah. And that's it for WIDA updates right now.
Thanks, Rachel. So at this point, we're just going to break into 2 breakout rooms. And the main topics that we kind of wanted to talk about were the language assistance plans or programs, and then also just how things are going with WIDA right now. You're not, I guess, bound to those 2 topics if there's something else that you wanted to talk to your group about, but those were kind of the topics of the day. And so if you didn't have other issues that you wanted to discuss, you might just kind of want to talk about where are you, you know, with your implementation of your language assistance plans, or how are things going with the WIDA test. So we're going to do about 12 minutes in the groups, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more just to kind of get a quick report out from each group. So you see here that, you know, to try to see if there's any themes, and then maybe if one person from each group could just do a report out at the end. You don't have to say everything that was discussed, but maybe just some of the main points. And then we'll talk a little bit about next year, and then we'll call it a day. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my sharing. I'm going to, so we're back from our breakout rooms. We're just going to do kind of a quick summary. I think in the WIDA front that there's quite a bit of concern. Just lots and lots of issues and Rachel kind of covered a lot of those preemptively on her slides about the issues that are going on all around the state. So it's hard to get the kids in. If they come in, it's hard to know that they are going to be focused on the things that they need to do, or are they just clicking through it? In some cases, we're trying to monitor too many kids at one time. So lots of issues, and it sounds like that's a statewide problem. And so just trying to get all those documented and document all those efforts, I think, is going to be the key for that one. When it came to the language assistance plans, we kind of ran the gamut from, you know, we really looked closely at this and have resources aligned to what is required, to watch out for the lawsuit that will be coming soon. So that was kind of the gamut that ran in our group.
Our group covered a lot of those same things. There's just such a variety of issues and concerns and considerations that have to be made with WIDA testing. It sounds like it's just across the board, so many different areas that need to be considered. Jim had spoke about just even with the speaking portion of the exam, having enough space to be able to separate the students, because the students don't necessarily want to be near each other or should be near each other when they're speaking, and just the masks, and that kind of adds another layer to the difficulty of that part of the test. And just in Muskegon, they have 60 high schoolers that need to come in to take the exam. And how do you convince 60 high schoolers to come in and not be at home and come in and take this half-day test instead? And if there's a way to incentivize them, or if there's some other creative plan to come up with that to address that issue. And we talked a little bit about the language assistance programs too, and just that there's issues all over the county, but even though that there's a long way to go, there's still a lot of progress that has been made. Jackie pointed out that when she first started with Muskegon, she had 250 LEP students that she had just to herself. And now we have, I don't even know how many teachers there are at Muskegon, probably at least 10, maybe not, that work with English learners. So.
Don't I wish there's 3.
Oh, 3?
Yeah, not
Well, I guess I'm
including
thinking of the 2A immersion
right.
school.
But yeah,
covering the
okay, including them, yeah, okay. But even in that school, there are some who need extra support
Mhm.
beyond.
And that's where Angela comes in, right?
That's my job. We
Yep.
also though have a bilingual consultant that we pay that comes in as well to work with our newer teachers. But that's also my job, is to co-teach and model. I go in and co-teach and I model for those teachers. So it's part of our plan.
Nice.
Well, I appreciate everybody getting together. I hope it wasn't frustrating. I hope it was maybe okay to like hear where other people are and things like that too. So, I think just one other thing that kind of came up, just about like caseload sizes, and this is in guidance from MDE when it comes to caseloads, and thinking about Jackie's situation where she had 250 kids on her caseload. What the state is shooting for in their guidance, and I'm not sure if this goes back to a law or if it's just guidance, but they say that your caseload of EL students shouldn't be any more than the typical caseload of your teachers. And so if you have 150 or 250 kids, I guess it depends on how much you're seeing them, because a lot of high school teachers have caseloads of 150 kids, so it just kind of depends on what the situation is a little bit. But so that's just something else that just kind of came to mind as we were talking about that today. So well, we're kind of getting to the end of our time together today, but we do have a survey that is in the dashboard that we'd appreciate if everybody could, and it looks like Rachel put that into the chat. Oh, sorry, I do have one other thing to add. I'm going to paste something else in the chat that I pasted in for the group that I was in. We mentioned earlier about Pam Schwalier's webinar that she did. I think it was just last week. It might have been 2 weeks ago now. I can't remember. I'm going to paste in there all of the resources from that. So I just put that in the chat, and it's also in our agenda. So that has the full presentation that she gave and the full recording of it. Personally, I think if you read through the slides, that you probably don't also need to watch the recording. It just depends on how you get information in, but pretty much everything that was discussed was in the slides. So so that's just something to consider. If I know that some people were interested maybe in seeing those resources. So I put it in chat. It's also in the agenda. The link to the survey is in chat, and it's also in the agenda. And the survey is really kind of trying to just get a little bit of feedback about where everybody's programs are, based on some of the conversation that we had today. I just wanted to get a little bit of informal feedback from the group. If we were to do this again next year, we just had 2 sessions this year. We kind of wanted to just do a little bit of a slow start for this. Would, just like I said, kind of informal feedback, we can send something more formal, but would this group be interested in doing this again next year, where we got together just a couple of times? Is there a need to get together more often? Is there a need to do something more formal than just open forums? Just kind of wanted to open the floor to see if there's any feedback on that.
I've enjoyed doing this way so far, and I also like putting faces with the names and knowing that I now have people that I can reach out to in different areas that have experience beyond me to get help from. So either way, this has been helpful for me doing it like this.
Thanks,
I was going to say the same thing. It's nice to network and collaborate and share ideas. So it's a good idea. I think it's great.
Thanks, Jody.
I'm a part of Pam Schwalier's EL Connect, which meets like 8 times a year, EL Advisory, which meets 4 times a year. I'm doing the MDE EL coordinators thing, which is 6 times a year. And then you guys are twice a year. I'm getting a lot of training this year. One thing I would like, and I think it probably would be best from this group, is I would love to collaborate with other small, mostly white, with schools with small EL populations. Like sometimes I get put in rooms with West Ottawa. I can't compete with that. I don't know what they're doing. They don't know what I'm doing, whatever.
Right.
So I personally would like to have something like this where I'm in collaborating with people who are in similar situations. Because at my school, and I tell this to Jim a lot, I'm a department of one and I don't have anyone to brainstorm with.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Jan.
for that, Diane.
Yep, thank you. All right, well, I know we didn't get a chance to hear from everybody, but I'm
Sorry.
sure we'll send a follow-up survey with something a little more formal about, how often might people want to get together, what days and times work, and, that sort of thing. So, but I've just appreciated the conversation, appreciated everybody coming out for the couple of sessions that we had this year. And I hope that there was a few things that people were able to take back. And for those of you that were already experts, thank you for bringing your expertise and sharing it with us. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and call it a night.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Rachel. This has been really great and
Thanks, Heather.
supportive and essential.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice
Yeah.
seeing you guys. Thanks for coming out. I know it's late and it's storming out, but